Around the World in 80 Days, Chapter 20, in which Fix comes face to face with Phileas Fogg. While these events were passing at the opium house, Mr. Fogg, unconscious of the danger he was in losing the steamer, quietly escorting out about the streets of the English quarter, making the necessary purchases for the long voyage before them. It was all very well for an Englishman like Mr. Fogg to make a tour of the world with a carpet-bag. A lady could not be expected to travel comfortably under such conditions. He acquitted his task with the characteristic serenity, and inevitably replied to the remonstrances of his fair companion, who was confused by his patience and generosity. "It is in the interest of my journey, a part of my program." The purchases made, they returned to the hotel, where they dined at a sumptuously served table d'hote, after which Aouda, shaking hands with her protector after the English fashion, retired to her room for rest. Mr. Fogg absorbed himself throughout the evening in the perusal of the Times Illustrated London News. He had been capable of being astonished at anything. It would have not been to see his servant returning at bedtime. But, knowing that the steamer was not to leave for Yokohama until the next morning, he did not disturb himself about the matter. When Passepartout did not appear the next morning to answer his master's bell, Mr. Fogg, not betraying the least vexation, contented himself with taking his carpet-bag, calling Aouda, and sending for a palanquin. It was then 8 o'clock. At 9:30, it being then high tide, the Carnatic would leave the harbor. Mr. Fogg and Aouda got into the palanquin, their luggage being brought after on a wheelbarrow, and half an hour later stepped onto the quay, whence they were to embark. Mr. Fogg then learned that the Carnatic had sailed the evening before. He expected to find not only the steamer, but his domestic, and was forced to give up both. But no sign of disappointment appeared on his face, and merely remarked to Aouda, "It is an accident, madam, nothing more." At this moment a man who had been observing him attentively approached. It was Fix, who, bowing, addressed Mr. Fogg. "Were you not, like me, sir, a passenger on the Rangoon, which arrived yesterday?" "I was," replied Mr. Fogg coldly, "but I have not the honor." "Pardon me, I thought I should find your servant here." "Do you know where he is, sir?" asked Aouda anxiously. "What?" responded Fix, feigning surprise. "Is he not with you?" "No," said Aouda, "he has not made his appearance since yesterday." "Could he have gone on board the Carnatic without us?" "Without you, madam?" answered the detective. "Excuse me, did you intend to sail in the Carnatic?" "Yes, sir." "So did I, madam, and I am excessively disappointed. The Carnatic, its repairs being completed, left Hong Kong 12 hours before the stated time, without any notice being given, and we must now wait a week for another steamer." As he said a week, Fix felt his heart leap for joy. Fogg detained in Hong Kong for a week, there would be time for the warrant to arrive, and fortune at last favored the representative of the law. His horror may be imagined when he heard Mr. Fogg say in his placid voice, "But there are other vessels besides the Carnatic, it seems to me, in the harbor of Hong Kong." And offering his arm to Aouda, he directed his steps toward the docks in search of some craft about to start. Fix, stupefied, followed, but it seemed as if attached to Mr. Fogg by an invisible thread. Chance, however, appeared really to have abandoned the man hitherto served so well. For 3 hours Phileas Fogg wandered about the decks with the determination, if necessary, to charter a vessel to carry him to Yokohama. But he could only find vessels which were loading or unloading, which could not therefore set sail. Fix began to hope again. But Mr. Fogg, far from being discouraged, was continuing his search, resolved not to stop if he had to resort to Macao, where he was accosted by a sailor on one of the wharves. "Is your honor looking for a boat?" "Have you a boat ready to sail?" "Yes, your honor, a pilot boat, number 43, the best in the harbor." "Does she go fast?" "Between 8 and 9 knots the hour. Will you look at her?" "Yes." "Will your honor be satisfied with her? Is it for a sea excursion?" "No, for a voyage." "A voyage? Yes. Will you agree to take me to Yokohama?" The sailor leaned on the railing, opening his eyes wide, and said, "Is your honor joking?" "No. I have missed the Carnatic, and I must get to Yokohama by the 14th at the latest, to take the boat for San Francisco." "I'm sorry," said the sailor, "but it is impossible. I offer you £100 per day, in addition to the reward of £200 if I reach Yokohama in time. Are you in earnest?" "Very much so." The pilot walked away a little distance and gazed out to sea, evidently struggling between the anxiety to gain such a large sum and the fear of venturing so far. Fix was in mortal suspense. Mr. Fogg turned to Oda and asked her, "Would you not be afraid, would you, madam?" "Not with you, Mr. Fogg," was her answer. The pilot now returned, shuffling his hat in his hands. "Well, pilot," said Mr. Fogg. "Well, your honor," replied he, "I could not risk myself, my men, or my little boat for scarcely 20 tons on so long a voyage at this time of year. Besides, we could not reach Yokohama in time, for it is 1,660 miles from Hong Kong." "Only 1,600, said Mr. Fogg. "It is the same thing." Fix breathed more freely. "But," added the pilot, "it might be arranged another way." Fix ceased to breathe at all. "How?" asked Mr. Fogg. "By going to Nagasaki, the extreme south of Japan, or even to Shanghai, which is only 800 miles from here. In going to Shanghai, we should not be forced to sail the wide of the China coast, which would be a great advantage, as the currents run northward and would aid us." "Pilot," said Mr. Fogg, "I must take the American steamer at Yokohama, and not at Shanghai or Nagasaki." "Why not?" returned the pilot. "The San Francisco steamer does not start from Yokohama. It puts in at Yokohama and Nagasaki, but it starts from Shanghai." "Are you sure of that?" "Perfectly." "And when does the boat leave Shanghai?" "On the 11th, at 7 in the morning. We have therefore 4 days before us, and that is 96 hours, and in that time, if we had good luck and a southwest wind, and the sea was calm, we could make those 800 miles to Shanghai." "And you could go?" "In an hour, as soon as provisions could be got aboard and the sails put up." "It is a bargain. Are you the master of the boat?" "Yes, John Bunsby, master of the Tankadere." "Would you like some earnest money?" "If it would not put your honor out." "Here are £200 on account, sir," added Phileas Fogg, turning to Fix, "if you would like to take advantage." "Thanks, sir, I was about to ask the favour." "Very well, in half an hour we shall go on board." "But poor Passepartout," urged Oda, who was much disturbed by the servant's disappearance. "I shall do all I can to find him," replied Phileas Fogg. While Fix, in a feverish, nervous state, repaired to the pilot boat, the others directed their course to the police station at Hong Kong. Phileas Fogg there gave Passepartout's description and left a sum of money to be spent in search of him. The same formalities having been gone through at the French consulate, and the palanquin having stopped at the hotel for the luggage, which had been sent back there, they returned to the wharf. It was now 3 o'clock, and pilot boat number 43, with its crew on board and its provisions stored away, was ready for departure. The Tankadere was a neat little craft of 20 tons, as gracefully built as if she were a racing yacht. Her shining copper sheathing, her galvanized ironwork, her deck, white as ivory, betrayed the pride taken by John Bunsby in making her presentable. Her 2 masts leaned a trifle backward, and she carried a brigantine, foresail, storm jib, and standing jib, and was well rigged for running before the wind. And she seemed capable of brisk speed, which indeed she had already proved by gaining several prizes in pilot boat races. The crew of the Tankadere was composed of John Bunsby, the master, and 4 hardy mariners who were familiar with the Chinese Sea. John Bunsby himself, a man of 45 or thereabouts, vigorous, sunburnt, with a sprightly expression of the eye, an energetic and self-reliant countenance, would have inspired confidence in the most timid. Phileas Fogg and Oda went on board, where they found Fix already installed. Below deck was a square cabin of which the walls bulged out in the form of cots above the circular divan. In the center was a table provided with a swinging lamp. The accommodation was confined but neat. "I am sorry I have nothing better to offer you," said Mr. Fogg to Fix, who bowed without responding. The detective had a feeling akin to humiliation in profiting by the kindness of Mr. Fogg. "It is certain," thought he, "the rascal that he is a polite one." The sails and the English flag were hoisted at 10 minutes past 3. Mr. Fogg and Oda, who were seated on deck, cast a glance at the quay, in the hopes of espying Passepartout. Fix was not without his fears lest chance should direct the steps of the unfortunate servant whom he had so badly treated in this direction, in which case an explanation the reverse of satisfactory to the detective must have ensued. But the Frenchman did not appear, and without a doubt was still lying under the stupefying influence of opium. John Bunsby, master, at length gave the order to start, and the Tankadere, taking the wind under her brigantine, foresail, and standing jib, bounded briskly forward over the waves. this is the end of chapter 20. So Passepartout has been left in Hong Kong. So, Fogg is making best speeds possible to Shanghai in order to catch the steamer on its way up to Yokohama. So he's going to be taking a shorter route, getting on the steamer that he was planning to take across anyway, but getting on it early. So this is a great advantage to him, or it could be an advantage to him if he can pick up time getting from Shanghai to Yokohama. Though the departure from Yokohama is kind of fixed, so he may not be able to gain anything there. But so he's going on a sailing ship. And jibs are types of sails. They are in the front. And it said brigantine. So a brigantine is a two-masted ship. And usually square sailed. Whole bunch. My cousin Ellie knows all about boats. She sails out on Lake Pontchartrain down in Louisiana. And it's just north of Nolens where she lives. But sailing is awesome, and hopefully they have good wind. It said that the boat looked like it could go close to the wind, because when you're sailing into the wind, you can't sail into the wind because the wind pushes, but the boat can go sideways to the wind. So what you do is you go sideways to the wind, a little bit into it, and then sideways back. Because what happens is the wind pushes on the sail, but the boat also has a keel. So you have the sail like this, and the keel like this, and the sail pushes this way, and the keel pushes this way. So you have this effect where it kind of goes along the keel, and the sail pushes the boat kind of sideways and into the wind. So if you want to go into the wind, you go just to the right of the wind, and then just to the left of the wind, and just to the right of the wind. And you kind of snake back and forth, and that's called tacking. Boats go fastest across the wind because the sail and the keel can be at angles and just push. Downwind, you're actually limited to as fast as the wind is blowing. You can actually go faster than the wind is blowing if you go sideways, which is really kind of neat. So that's a little bit that I know about sailing. My friend Daryl knows a whole bunch because he's also a sailor, and sailors know a lot of stuff and learn. Talk to you later.